All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of our podcast. We're here today with Adam Chronister. How are you doing today, Adam?
I'm doing good. Doing good, guys.
Awesome. And how are you today, Nick?
Cannot complain. Saying hi from Barranquilla, Colombia, and yeah,
Colombia. Very
cannot complain
nice.
at all. It's very
Very
nice.
nice. All right, yeah. So if you guys aren't familiar with Adam, he's the founder of Enleaf, which is a very successful US-based marketing agency. He's been featured in things like MarketWatch, Wired, and the Wall Street Journal. He's overseen the growth of companies to the millions and millions of dollars in revenue per month. He has over a decade of experience delivering results for companies. Um, see what else we got here. He's spoken at a bunch of conferences, which is actually how we met Adam. We met him in SEO Mastery Summit in Saigon just a couple months back.
Yep.
And
Got
yeah,
the party down.
since then, like everyone else, he's been really focused on AI because it's hard not to focus on it. And yeah, so that's Adam. Did I miss anything super important there?
No, I think you got most of it. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, great to have you on. And yeah, just in case people aren't super familiar with you yet, we'll ask some kind of warm-up questions. So I
Sounds
guess
good. I'm ready, guys.
awesome. So
Nice.
so yeah, what do you spend most of your time doing? Like, what's the most of your day-to-day work involving?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the day. Lately, as I alluded to, in some of the warm up, I've been focusing quite a bit on AI. Just the last couple of weeks, I've been really my goals have been like to try to create a new process or tool almost every day. And I'm not obviously creating a whole new tool every day, but I want to conceptualize a new tool every day. I don't always do that, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. So luckily, I have a good team on the back end that keeps the day to day running. So between that, we're relaunching our website. I'm working on a webinar for IMG Gold. So this stage of life, a lot of pet projects, right? And it's been fun, but it's also like juggling plates. But yeah, I'd rather do that than be in the weeds on the client stuff, which I still do a fair bit amount of that. I would say
Hmm.
typically towards the end of the week, I still get fairly involved with reporting to clients, but most of the day to day SEO agency stuff is pretty much managed by our backend team right now.
Awesome. So it sounds like you've done
Dude,
a good
you're
job delegating, unlike me, something I'm still really trying to
I'm
work on.
trying. It's always, there's always ebb and flow when it comes to that stuff. So
For sure.
But dude,
Uh,
I mean, looking to build a new AI-based tool every day, that sounds like quite a bit to chew off. I mean, like, are you developing something that you know comes into use every day, or are you kind of taking on projects, getting ideas, and then rolling them into however long it takes to develop what you're looking for?
yeah, so a lot of it is like basically trying to take what we do as an agency and figuring out how can I leverage AI and yeah, and other systems to do this.
for sure.
And I'll give you guys a good example. Like it's funny because we as an agency, like we don't do a ton of branding, right? We'll do some here and there, but it's not like our core competency. Like most of what we do is website design, SEO, and pay-per-click marketing. But a couple months ago, I had a client that wanted us to do some branding for them. And I said, okay, we'll do it. Right. And so, what we did is kind of the whole arbitrage thing. I was like, okay, I can find somebody, a good designer with a little bit of experience. You work with them. So anyway, I kind of integrated them, and I'm like, okay, what's your process? So they provided me with a whole list of questions, right? And so I passed that on to my client. I got the input, gave it back to the designer, waited for 2 weeks, and it was just kind of like crickets, right? And then I'm kind of like looking at my clock, and I'm like, okay, we got a deadline to hit here. And sure enough, the gal's like, hey, I'm really sorry. I've never done this before, but I'm not going to be able to deliver this. So I
Yikes.
was I was kind of like caught with egg on my face, and then I'm like,
Yeah.
oh crap, what am I going to do? And then I thought, wait, I have all the client's input, right? Based off all these questions. I'm like, I wonder if I could create this brand story guide, this brand story outline with ChatGPT. And sure enough, I did that. Like I just took the questions and I told ChatGPT, I'm like, based on this input, I want you to create a tagline, a brand vision, brand pillars, right? And then took all of that written information, which was actually really well prepared. I would argue it, it probably would have came out as well as, the person I hired that dropped the ball would have done. And so that got me down the track of like, okay, well, I guess I should back up. So we've taken that whole process and actually proceduralized it. So now we have a whole process where somebody fills out a Google form that gets synced up with AppScript to Google Sheets, which has an embedded GBT for Sheets that pulls in OpenAI's API. So basically, that whole process, and that then gets put into a Google slide. So that whole process now is completely automated. And we have
nice.
other tools like that. Like that was what I did that in about a week. And when I say I also, work with some back-end developers to kind of string it all together, but I conceptualized it and then handed it off. We have other tools, like we have a press release generator that's not done, but it's like midway through the process. Same idea, right? You ask the same kind of questions you would ask a client, right? And you have them fill out a form. And now instead of having a writer go and digest and reinterpret all that stuff, it happens through a process. We have a
Very
content
cool.
creation tool, and then just like a whole library of different prompts that we're using. So that's kind of the idea. Like it sounds like this big, enormous thing, but really these are kind of micro tools and micro processes that we're trying to figure out, like how can we leverage little things that we do in our business day in and day out and start automating it.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
Yeah.
yeah, we'll definitely
Micro
dive
things
in.
that add up.
Yeah, we'll definitely dive into this stuff in a little bit more in just a minute, since it's kind of the thing we're really talking about today. But real quick, how are you automating these processes? Are you using like Python? Do you know any coding yourself? I know you said you worked with some back-end developers, but um, how much do you play around with actually trying to automate this stuff with code?
Yeah, good question. So it's funny because my background originally was software development, and I say was because I really don't code at all anymore.
Hmm.
I got about 3/4 of the way through my like software development degree, and I was like, oh man, this is not my bag. I mean, I love the whole environment,
Hmm.
but my brain just doesn't quite work like in a terminal all day. Um, but I know enough about the space that I can articulate stuff. And actually, it's been kind of
Gotcha.
cool. So now, like, I'm taking that old like spark of development, and I find like interpreting that back into like a prompting and whatnot has been helpful because it's a lot of the same kind of logic
Hmm.
without having to understand different syntax and languages. So a lot of what I've been doing, and I think the biggest thing that has propelled like some of our processes is using a tool or a plugin called ChatGPT for Sheets.
Hmm.
I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but it
Yep.
basically allows you to pull uh, ChatGPT into Google Sheets, and I find that amazingly powerful because it really creates a great like test environment. And you asked about Python. So actually, we have a content creation process that we've created with GBT for Sheets. And literally just this week, I'm working with a Python developer to start turning parts, if not all of that, into an actual application. But yeah, a lot of this has started out very manually, where I'm literally like creating and writing
Hmm.
down one prompt after another, which is part of kind of how I started creating a course, and then taking that to the next phase, which is like stacking that. I call it prompt stacking, where I'm stacking that into um, GBT for Sheets, and then the final phase, depending on whether I want to take a particular process or application, would be to actually code it with something like Python or maybe JavaScript or whatnot.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the method to the madness, at least at this point.
Cool. Yeah, that's something I'm actually starting to look into myself. I have some programming experience as well, but yeah, a while
Nice.
back. So I'm trying to pick up Python, and it actually, then you can even use ChatGPT to help you write the Python code to basically
Yeah.
to call itself, which is really cool. But yeah, I kind of
Yeah.
wanted to kind of make my own like content automation process with Python. So you're not sitting there and have to prompt it a million times, right? Just more like you give it the input and then just let it go. But yeah,
Yeah.
cool stuff. Um, so yeah, I know you have your agency. That's kind of like your main thing. Do you have any
Mhm.
personal SEO projects, like any kind of like affiliate sites that are just your own thing?
We don't do a lot of affiliate. I've danced around that off and on throughout the years, but I find like I have too much ADD. So which is great when I'm in an agency, because if I get kind of bored of one client's project, then I'll just switch for the day or the week or whatnot, or hand that off to one of our team members. So I don't do a ton of affiliate. I've dabbled with it, but I just don't have enough of attention span or patience, uh, quite honestly, for affiliate. I do have some pet projects. I mean, I have like a couple of different like equity partnerships that were, are kind of in the works. Some pet project websites. So we have some like secondary market agency sites that we're building out, just more for the fun and using that as a test bed, but also to allow us get into other markets we're not in currently. And then I have in the past built other like smaller tools even before the AI stuff. So we have like a headline analyzer that we built a number of years ago, um, a search engine spider simulator, a website grader, and there's one other that I'm blanking right now. But that's kind of the extent of like what I would consider pet projects. But yeah, I don't do a lot of affiliate now. I'd still like to. I haven't ruled it out. Just it's one thing at a time for me right now. So
That's one thing I've
That's
been
awesome.
noticing a lot lately is that a lot of the more successful SEOs have their own tools.
Yeah.
They say, I like to do things my way.
yeah,
This is what works for me. This is what I want. And so yeah, they end up kind of doing their own thing rather than um, yeah, just really, purchasing all the products and jumping from product to
yeah.
product as they're released and buying into all the hype and whatnot. Um, are there any SEO products, any kind of newer things that you've got recently that you think are well worth the cost?
Or anything you're putting
I mean,
out,
what's that?
or anything you're putting out for that matter,
Well, I'm sure he likes all the tools that he's putting out, but
Yeah, yeah.
well, I mean,
Yeah, if you're
he's
willing
making
to
for a reason,
share.
right? But any
Hmm.
Yeah, I
any
mean, we use a lot of like your typical tools. I would say our main stack, like tool stack, is Screaming Frog. Like I've used that forever. And I still love it. It's like
hmm
the backbone to all of our audits that we
yeah,
do. Um SEM Rush, we're in there all the time. And then Surfer.
no
Like even though
Ahrefs,
like
huh?
we're building our own tools, we still use Surfer. It's funny because I feel like in some extent like I'm like creating my own little micro surfer
hmm
surfer SEO tool. um
Hmm.
like today I was talking to our Python dev, and it's like, okay, we need to crawl all of these search results and whatnot. um but yeah, we still rely on a lot of tools, like, and I don't think we're ever going to completely replace a lot of those tools. I know for us, and maybe this is true for others that build their own tools, a lot of it is just like there's little things, even the best tools, there's little things you're like, oh, I like 95% of what this tool does, but I really wish it did this one thing, right?
hmm
Um,
Right.
like going back to the headline analyzer that we created, I built that a couple years ago because there was one other company that was doing it, and it was a really great tool. It was basically a free tool, and then they put it behind a really crappy paywall, and they kind of just let the project deteriorate. And it also didn't include in its metrics like the keyword. It was more coming at it from a like a traditional marketing bent. And I'm like, man, not only have they made this tool annoying because I have to go through this like weird paywall, but they don't include this one feature. So I just worked with our team to recreate it, for our own purposes.
hmm
Um, But yeah, usually it's just to scratch your own itch. And I do know like some of the tools, I think especially looking at a lot of the price points at a lot of these third-party tools, like there is also some benefit there because I'm looking at what I could pay to have for a tool that does a lot of what we're doing internally. It's like, okay, that's going to add up fairly quickly. And also we can tweak with it, we can make
Mhm.
Yeah.
changes to it. One of the things that we've built into our content tool is variable perimeters. So we have like inputs for the person of pronouns. So that's like your first, second, third person. We can build in the persona. So we can take a very customized persona, like embed that into our inputs, and then every piece of content we create after that is already built around that preset persona. The tone of voice, and again, I've seen other tools that
Wow.
do combinations of that kind of stuff, but not exactly the way we're doing it, right? So we've got our own little spin on the way we're doing it, much like others have their own, twist on things. So
Are you
But
feeding the persona prompting essentially into like the system input field in Playground or what?
not in Playground, but in Sheets. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I don't know, I don't think I coined this term. I'm sure I stole it somewhere, but like the idea of prompt stacking, which you can do this manually if you're using like ChatGPT. You just do one prompt and then you run another. The problem is if you're doing it in that infrastructure, it's much more time consuming. And that's where a tool like Sheets, or actually encoding something to do, okay, take this prompt and based off that output, automatically run another prompt and then automatically run another prompt. So like for instance, like with our content tool, what we're doing is not necessarily unique. We're basically taking the top search results for a keyword, right? And we're taking the top H2 headers across the top competitors. We're crawling those, and then that becomes the title and the structure for our content. All right. So again, this is stuff that all has already been done. It's very similar to like Surfer or Pop or these other tools. It's just the other stuff and the other controls that we can put into it is works well for us because we can play with it. We can modify structures. We can take the whole framework and customize that to each need, as opposed to having one tool that is somewhat rigid across different client restraints and needs.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, your tweakability, so to speak, is fine-tuned depending on who you're working with or who you want to work with.
Yeah. And we're always adapting it. Like even just last night, I know you guys had Steve Toth on recently, and I heard him speak in Austin, and he was talking about like EAT, and he gave a really good example from one of his notes where he's talking about taking a stat, right? You take a stat and you rework it. So the stat is basically the same data, but it's repurposed, right? So you take a fraction into a decimal, or a decimal into a fraction, or cut it in half. And I was thinking on that last night, and I'm like, oh, I could create a prompt that does that, right? That takes a statistic and spits it out so that it's actually semantically unique, right? So now, unlike a tool that is not mine, I can take that prompt and now I can add that to my tool as that idea becomes available, which is probably what we're going to do, right? So it's that kind of stuff. Like again, maybe creating tools isn't for everybody, but again, I'm not a developer, and I can string stuff together with plugins and APIs, and just really having a lot of fun with what we're doing, right? So
Awesome. Yeah, so you kind of started talking about this already, your content creation system, which is facilitated by AI. But can you walk us through actually step by step what the full process looks like?
yeah. So I touched on that a little bit already, but
Hmm.
basically we have a couple different inputs. The person of pronouns, your tone of voice, the headers, the H2 headers, which we grab from like external inputs. And what's the other one? We can input authorship, so we can put authorship in there as well. So those are kind of the main like inputs that are in there and part of that.
What do you mean by authorship? Sorry to interrupt.
So you can basically put an author, which you can either embed as part of the persona, or we can include that as part of the content as a separate piece. So, right. So for instance, if we want a piece of content to be authored by, to have basically a dynamic bio section on our content, we can embed, details about that author into that piece of content.
Gotcha. Okay, so first step is kind of creating the persona, style of writing, maybe what they're an expert in, something like that.
Yep.
And then step two is you're creating an outline, which you're basically going and scraping maybe a couple of top rankers and pulling their H2s out, something like that.
Yep.
And then step three, I'm just going to go ahead and assume is given that input, you just have it write section by section.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we're doing is we take all of the H2s from typically either the 3 to position 3 to 7 in the organic results for a particular keyword, right?
Mhm.
So we can set like in the spreadsheet, you can say how many of the SERPs you want to gather those header tags from, right? From 3 to 10. Usually we'll do 3 to 5, right? Depending on the SERP. So you put that in there, right? You put that number. So let's say you put 3, right? Then it's going to go through and collect this whole list of headers. And then we use ChatGPT to organize that down to H2s. And then we use another prompt to take that H2 list and turn that into a sorted list. Then we have another prompt that says, organize this in an orderly fashion or manner in which somebody would, normally read it in a blog post. So that gets organized even further to about 10 to 15 key takeaways, right? That's kind of the way that we're calling them, key takeaways. So each key takeaway becomes a paragraph in the larger content piece. And then all of that is actually dynamically triggered by those previous inputs. So we can have our keyword and we can have our whole content piece outlined, right? Based off of that keyword and those H2s. But then we can play with the person of pronouns, right? We can take that trigger and say, okay, I want to take this piece of content and I want to change it to first person. And then it gets a little bit more personal, and then it says, as a pawn shop owner, I think that this is the best way you should negotiate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a second person would be it would read differently, right? It would be more like exterior tone. And then we can change to the persona, right? So you can change it from saying, let's say we were using the pawn shop example. You could change the persona as a pawn shop owner, or you could change it to a journalist. You could change it to a customer, right? And it will adapt the content based off of those inputs.
Very cool.
So that's kind of what we're doing to maintain the control, because we found that for certain things, like first person works well, and for others it doesn't, right? And the other thing that's interesting is the persona can be as narrow or as broad as you want, and that will change too. Like sometimes we'll literally cut and paste a client's about us section and put that into the persona field, and then it starts writing as the client, right? So I'll give you an example. Usually it will spit out paragraphs like, having been in the pawn shop industry for 25 years, we understand the value of, a good trade or whatever. So it'll start working those kind of things in there. And this is kind of also where I'm going with a lot of this, or hope to be going. So, even though we don't do a lot of branding, that earlier brand story guide actually can be used and boiled down for a really in-depth client persona. So not only can we resell that as a typical brand story outline, we can use that exercise to start building very detailed personas. So one, I don't know where we'll go with this right now. It's
Right.
definitely an internal tool, but I envision a scenario where we can customize this to industries or clients and say, look, we're going to build your voice, your persona into this stack so that you can generate content that is already kind of pre-delegated for
Dude,
the way you want to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I like that a lot. That's something that I think we would go ahead and use hire for sure.
Yeah, it's something that I've actually started doing that I felt like none of the tools I had tested really did it right quite yet. But yeah, so if we're writing like an SEO article, it's like, hi, your name is Chris. You have
Right.
over a decade of experience in SEO. Your specialty is link building, and really just like just feed it information about me, and then it starts writing from that. It's like I did this,
Yep.
because of all my experience building backlinks, and ranking sites. So yeah, it definitely makes the content better than the kind of generic stuff it spits out, which is very just like fact
Sure.
based, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to back up just a little bit and a little bit earlier in this content process for you, where you actually grab the heading tags. What are you using to actually grab those? Like, are you using the new plugin or whatever where ChatGPT goes out and grabs them, or yeah, what's going
Yeah,
on?
good question. So right now, like the first iteration of our process, we were actually doing that manually, using a plugin called, I think it's called Meta All in One. I could be butchering the name. Basically, it's a Chrome plugin that allows you to quickly grab the H2 headers off of a website, right?
Gotcha.
V2, and this is what we're working on now, is like doing that portion in Python, right? And having Python do the crawl, Python with potentially a combination of the SERP API. Um, I have started dabbling a little bit with some of the plugins that can go and crawl the web, which I think a lot of those could do some of this manually. But we really want to get it to the point where it happens essentially automatically, right? We're not having to string a bunch of stuff together. And we're not 100% there, but literally working on that as we speak. So,
Exactly. So no worker needs to sit down and follow the SOP. The SOP is push the button, given the
yeah.
given the input, and then it gets used.
The SOP is basically like set your perimeters, put your keyword, hit enter, have fun,
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So
fun times. So let's pretend that part happened. Let's pretend that you built your persona, you got it exactly, it's writing in first person, it's using their experience to kind of write the content. You push the button and all the sections have been written out. So yeah, you have your kind of like one-click AI generated content at this point.
Mhm.
What do you do now?
Yeah, so the next step, is still some level of editing, right? I think hopefully this is a consensus. It's certainly for us, and I've seen other people, the Matt Diggities of the world and others, that even the best AI stuff right now, I think still needs some level of editing, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so we have a full content team. They're very involved in AI. I think like our writer Steven has probably used more tools than just about anyone I know. Like he shares with me as many tools as I share with him. But we still run that through our editing process. So regardless of whether it was our tool or we're using something like Surfer or some of the various third-party tools we played with, the next step is really going through an editing process to make sure that we're not missing anything, that there's nothing like, no hallucinations that are injecting, unfactual content. So right now that's still a big part of the process. And then obviously just the general stuff that is maybe not impossible, but difficult to do, like, importing it into a CMS, right? Or adding your images, And we do have, clients across CMS systems. So we have Shopify clients, WordPress clients, Webflow. And so, everything's not always equal in our agency. So once the content's done, there's more to be done, primarily editing and setup, and then, the various approvals that various clients may or may not need.
Gotcha. And so you wrote the article, one click, boom, it spits out. Then someone goes in and they fine tune it, they fact check, they make sure it's got stuff in there that you really want to include that might have been left out. You
Right.
optimize it with something like Surfer to make sure you're getting all the good keywords and stuff in there.
Yep.
So how long would you say this human aspect takes on an average length article? And yeah, I guess we'll just leave the question at that for now.
Yeah, I had a question similar to this the other day, and I don't have a perfect answer, but I can give you an antidote. So we have, I don't know, roughly 35, 37 some-ish clients, right? Give or take. Before really getting into AI, we would literally be down to the wire on content, right? And we're creating, roughly, you know, probably an average of 3 pieces of content per client. Each content piece is, between 15 to 3,000 words. You can kind of do the math, right? Multiply that by 35. It's a lot of stinking content. So until we started really leveraging AI to the extent we are now, we would be down to the wire by the end of the month.
Sure.
Now we're typically chopping about, I would say, a week and a half, maybe more, off of that process. And that's while also incrementally increasing our content output, right? That's one of the things I push our team to do is like, hey, now that we have all these tools and we're cutting, or basically improving our efficiency, now how can we offer more value to our clients? Which basically means let's do more for the same, right? We can charge roughly the same as what we used to, but our output is hopefully higher because we can leverage these tools. And let's face it, everybody else is. So like if you're doing the things that you used to be doing, like there's a good chance your competitors are using tools like these as well, right?
Right.
Gotcha. So you cut
Yeah,
out the
100%.
you cut down the content time, and you're allowed to fill that time providing additional value rather than just
Exactly. Yeah.
calling it there and
Yeah.
providing the same service as before. So you can really kind
Yeah.
of step it up. That's cool.
Yep.
And yeah, I guess something else I wanted to ask on this is, so once the human gets in there and they're editing the content that the AI spits out, would you have an idea of roughly, if you could gauge, like, X% of the content was written by AI and X% of the content was written by human, like what would your guess be as far as the ratio?
As far as what we're producing?
Yeah, like, so you produce some content for a client site, then a human goes in and edits it afterwards.
Yeah.
And so I'm asking, like, what percentage of the one content piece, like the one article, like what percent is written by AI and what percent is actually written by the human?
Can you
I mean, if I was to
differentiate?
guess, like I would say maybe 20% is human and the rest is AI.
Cool.
So
Yeah, I was just wondering because yeah, I would say the stuff I'm doing is probably somewhere between 20 to 50% depending on the type of article.
yeah.
But yeah, I just feel like
Ironically, and we can get into the whole AI detection conversation debate if you guys want to, but ironically, usually the score, depending on the tool you're using, reports the inverse, right? It will say 80% human and 20% AI. Although from my perspective, I really don't think any of it matters.
yeah.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
feel like that's
Agreed.
where I feel like that's where everyone's at this point, right? Like in the very beginning,
Yeah.
everyone's like, "Oh, we got to look at the AI detectors," and now
Yeah.
Google changed their guidelines, and so now most of the people that I talk to just don't look at them at all. But there's still kind of the
Yeah.
stragglers on Facebook who are like, "Hey, this failed, this failed originality. What should I do?" So you don't use AI detectors at all, is that correct?
I mean, I wouldn't say at all. We've used them and tested them, but I would say like we don't use them on a daily basis. Only because like when we were really like getting started with a lot of this stuff, like a lot of people, we had these concerns like, oh man, what if you load a website up with AI content and then Google comes back and slaps it against the wall, right?
Mm.
But the more that I've tested different systems, read different documentation that Google themselves put out, and just kind of look at the landscape, I'm like, there's such an inconsistency between these AI detectors. Two, there's pretty good like academic articles that say like AI detection is mathematically impossible. And three, I think the big thing, normally I don't believe anything Google says. But in this case, it makes sense when they say like, hey, we don't care how the content's created. And I don't think it's that they don't care. I think it's that they realize there's nothing they can really do about it. So it's like, hey, this ship is sailed, and instead of fighting it, like let's leverage AI, and they already are, right? Like they're already talking about, Bard, and they got that in a beta, and they're rolling out all of this other stuff. So I think they, as well as most of the people in the industry, realize like, that genie's out of the bottle. So let's not pretend like we're gonna, it feels like a little bit of a departure from the traditional Google propaganda, like, hey, let's scare you to do something, you know, uh, so
Yeah.
I think there are still things you want to consider. Like I do think like there are factors of quality that are going to be important, that to Google's kind of sentiment, are persistent regardless of how content is created. And so part of our big like challenge, and this is like that with that prompt I was working on yesterday with like the stat reconfiguration, is, okay, how do we create unique and useful content leveraging these systems, not in opposition to them, but using those systems. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing, like how do you create unique content, right? And I've even been thinking, it's funny, I've gotten fairly nostalgic on roundup post, right? You guys remember like roundup post? I haven't seen anyone do it for a long time. We used to do a few and got some pretty good traction. In fact, I think that's how I kind of first like connected with Kyle Roof and a lot of people in the industry, is I did a roundup post, right? But just lately I've been thinking about that. I'm like, that's unique content, right?
Yeah.
So we're launching a new site, but one of my goals, once that baby is live and we got a nice facelift, is to start doing some more roundup post in the spirit of like EAT and unique content, because that kind of stuff I think could be helpful in the whole scheme of things.
For sure.
For sure.
Jinx.
Right.
So, I agree with you 100% on everything you just talked about. Google, seems to kind of thrown in the towel to say they don't care about it. It's kind of like mathematically impossible to prove it. The AI detectors seem kind of sketchy at best. But one interesting counterpoint that someone's brought up to me recently, and I think it's a good one, is why are some people getting their AdSense denied? But basically, Google says that it's not good. Your website doesn't have good content or something, but it's all AI generated. Like, what exactly do you think is going on there?
I can't speak for AdSense. I guess the one thing I could think of is that mechanism is, I would imagine, a much smaller funnel to deal with. I mean, here's the reality. Like everybody in the SEO industry knows that for years, Google has had indexing issues, right? And that's with like traditional web. That's aside from AI altogether. So now you're trying to tell me that Google is going to inject, massive processing power to detect the entirety of the internet's content with AI. I think it's like impossible just from a pure processing perspective, like from my perspective. Now, could they come up with some manual penalty that's like manual AI detection, or even a microcosm where they like have some automated system that if flagged detects AI? Yes, they could, right? But on that extent too, like when's the last time like you guys have seen a manual penalty? I haven't seen one forever.
No,
Yeah.
forever.
And so,
forever.
I'm just trying to put all the pieces together. Like, okay, here's what Google says. Here's what's actually like practically possible. And so that's why, from our perspective, we're not worried about it. Here's the other thing too that's interesting. Like, I think maybe the week after Chat GBT was released, we created an article. I forget what it's called, something to the extent of exploring Chat GBT, right? The entire article was written with Chat GBT about what is Chat GBT, right? And only at the very end, there's a sentence that says, by the way, this entire article is written with AI, with Chat GBT. I didn't even SEO that article. I purely put it out to social media, right? It was kind of a social media experiment. I think still today, I don't even know if it has meta tiles and descriptions. It still ranks. Now it doesn't rank high. I think now it's like page two. But like right after it launched, like it was on like the bottom or the top of page 2, and that was out without doing any SEO. 100%. Like you run it through a system, it'll say 100% AI. So that's another point that tells me like you can absolutely rank with AI content, and that's right out of the box. That's let alone putting different inputs in there, going through an editing process. Now I think a lot of that stuff in the long term, like those additional like cherries on the cake or cherries on the ice cream, are gonna help you and make you more insulated, but you by all means can rank with purely AI content, because I've seen it and I've done it.
For sure. Yeah, just the one thing that I agree for the most part. It's just that the one thing is the AdSense thing. Like, what exactly is going on there that they're able to deny based on AI content? But it's probably something that's triggered their content spam filter, however that works, which we're not really sure of. There was a algo update, I think in October of 22. Which was the content spam, and then they did the link spam update like a month or two after that. But yeah, it's still just kind of interesting that.
I mean, call me a conspiracy theorist, but recently in the group we've been talking about that. We've been talking about seeing volatility in the SERPs, and I feel like whenever Google is having an issue with something that could make or break what's going on, they create this kind of instillment of volatility. And especially when we were talking to affiliate marketers, it seemed like, a lot of them were in this kind of purgatory feel of not being able to understand exactly what they were doing wrong, and why it was affecting them negatively. And I feel like that is such a common occurrence over the last decade or so of being in SEO, where when these things happen, it's just more of a shakeup that's kind of happening, and you've got to just sit through it.
Right.
You've got to keep doing whatever, and if that's including AI written content in your protocol, then perfectly fine. I don't.
Well, and you have to think like what percentage of users use AdSense, and I don't know what that number is, but you compare that to the sheer amount of websites on the internet. It's you're talking about a drop of water in the ocean, right?
Nothing.
So like if you are gonna implement AI detection, you're gonna do it in the bucket that you have more oversight and control, right? That's less processing intensive. So it honestly doesn't surprise me that they would be doing this with AdSense or AdWords, but maybe not on the web portion. So I don't know. I don't have a quick answer. I also think like I've done this exercise as well in my head. If I were Google, right, and I've already had issues with indexing, and now I have this AI challenge. And I think if you kind of read between the tea leaves, this is kind of what I understand. It would be easier for them to figure out what makes a piece of content unique, helpful, and all of that stuff, right? Instead of going through and finding out what makes a piece of content bad, it would be less processing intensive to say what makes a piece of content good, and then elevate that instead of demote, right? So just like from a pure logic perspective, it seems like that would make more sense. And that seems to parallel what they've already broadcast as far as like, all these things that they're promoting, right?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
agreed.
So back to indexing, I know you said, I think you were saying you produce about 3 pieces of content per client per month.
Yeah, depending on the client, some more, some less.
Okay.
Mostly
So,
more, but
so yeah, you're not exactly spamming them out with AI content. You're kind of, you're not doing these high numbers that a lot of people are doing, like 1,000 posts in a day, or 1,000 posts
yeah,
over even over a month or whatever. Some people doing, they're automatically setting it up to do like a post every hour or something.
yeah.
So I'm assuming you're not really having any trouble with indexing and stuff like that. Is that correct?
I mean, we still have troubles with indexing, even though we're not doing massive like mass page affiliate websites. But so no, I wouldn't say we don't have problems with indexing. Like even domains, that are, your SMBs or your companies of 30 people, a 50-page website, like we've still seen indexing issues with those sites, right?
Mm.
Sure.
We had one client that for no well, actually, no, there was a reason, right? They had a plugin that was causing some issue in WordPress. And because of that, Google de-indexed like an exorbitant amount of their pages, right? Most of them. And it took us a long time to get a lot of that stuff re-indexed. So even on smaller pages, we see indexing issues. And it's obviously not going to compare to a domain with tens of thousands of URLs, but it's still an issue. I think regardless of how small a site you are.
Okay, so 2 follow-up questions to that. Do you see any difference in trying to get AI content indexed rather than just all content? And if so, what are you, or then I guess second part, what are you doing when things have trouble indexing? Like how are you going about trying to get them indexed?
Yeah, so the first part, I don't think we've seen any real differences as far as indexing AI content versus like manually written content. I so far haven't seen anything that differentiates those, at least in our own like agency and practice. Um, Maybe for those that are doing much larger thresholds, they may have a little bit better data than we do in that respect. But on the agency side, we haven't seen much difference, right? As far as how to get stuff indexed, there's things that we do. I mean, first is really just kind of manual, like Google Search Console resubmission, reindexation request. And then if we have troubles there, then we'll throw links, we'll throw social signals at links, and seems like that tends to help a lot as well. Those are kind of the two things that we leverage right now. We have played with third party like reindexing services, but usually with the manual reindexation request and then social signals, that typically does the trick, right? And a lot of times we'll just keep logs of stuff. We'll like have a running sheet. Like if we have a client that has a particularly large list of indexing issues, we'll just keep a log, and we'll just keep resubmitting that until Google like gets tired of us banging on them, right?
Sure.
So
Just annoy them until they do what you want, right?
Knock,
yeah, it's like,
knock.
well, they
It's
annoy
me
me, so I'm gonna annoy
again.
them back, right?
For sure. Um, yeah, so that's kind of, what I'm hearing a lot as well is what I'm doing is Google's indexing API and also Twitter especially, but yeah, social,
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
social signals,
That
right?
seems to be the. It's funny, like that seems to be the answer for a long time, but it still works, right?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
it's not broke, right?
Yeah. So I think you're also, it looks like you're working on a course that you're going to be talking about becoming a better prompt engineer.
Yeah.
Yeah, yep. So I guess I'm working on a course for IMG Gold right now. Um, and really kind of going deep, like a lot of that course is kind of, I guess, structured on the core process that is going to kind of end up being part of our own internal tool. So in some extent, I guess it starts out going through a process I call prompt hijacking, right? And I apologize, but I was thinking about this. I'm probably not going to go into too much detail on how to do this, but I'll tell you roughly what it is,
Hmm.
only because I have some concerns that it could be plugged. But to give you a general idea, basically there are systems out there where you can find pre-existing libraries of prompts. The problem with some of these systems is they're hidden behind templates, so you can see the output and you can use them, but you can't actually see the prompts that are generating the output. And so we've found a method to kind of get around that, to uncover these prompts, and then from there we have access to a whole library of prompts that we can look at, like digest, build on top of. And so, yeah, I call that prompt hijacking. If yeah, I will be speaking on that, but right now I'm kind of keeping that to smaller groups, just because at least until I give my talk coming up here in August in Estonia, I'm going to keep that a little bit under wraps, just because I don't want
Okay.
to get burned before I present that to a wider audience.
For sure.
Either way, you guys heard it here first, okay? You heard it here
Yeah, prompt
first.
hijacking coming to a webinar near you.
Awesome.
And then, sorry, what was the other part of that question? Or
Yeah, I was just talking about the course you're making. So prompt hijacking is one thing you're going to talk about in the course. Is there anything else
yes,
the course is going to cover?
yeah. So we're going to cover prompt hijacking, and then we're going to go into like just kind of step by step, like our process by stacking prompts to create long form content. And then the latter end of that kind of dips like our toe in the water for utilizing third party tools to start stacking these prompts, right? I'm not going to show necessarily how to build the whole system we created, but I'll give people the core components so that they can start building their own systems and tools. And really that's the fun of it. Like I was inspired by a talk where somebody was doing a lot of automation in GBT for Sheets, creating social media posts, right? And I was like, oh, we could do this with like long form content. And so, what I hope people will get out of this, the webinar once completed, is not so much like a step by step, even though there is some of that in there, but really hopefully it instills in them the idea of, hey, here's a way to get really good at understanding how to become a good prompt engineer. And two, here's how I can take that knowledge as well as other tools and start building my own systems, my own processes, and bettering myself, my agency, my practice, or whatever one sees fit.
Awesome.
Sure.
Good stuff. I'll be on the lookout for that for sure. I need to be a better prompt engineer. Yeah, it's like, every day I'm kind of ingesting some AI content, and it's like every day I'm like, oh, that's, just I wasn't smart enough to think of that. So, yeah, I think the
Yeah,
course.
it's good. Like, I'm a big, as you can tell with the books behind me, I'm a big fan of learning from what other people have done, because if I'm left to my own devices, I don't get too far. But if I can build on top of like what other people have done, like I find I can get to the end of the road much quicker that way. So
For
Yeah.
sure, for sure. Well, yeah, we're coming up on about an hour now, so kind of start winding stuff down with some kind of general questions about the industry and AI. So I guess we
sure.
can start with um, just your general thoughts and feelings about the upcoming Google AI first search engine.
Yeah, I don't know. If I, it, if I said I wasn't somewhat nervous, I would be lying, right?
Hmm.
And that's kind of how I feel about the whole industry right now. Like it's, and not even SEO, just with AI in general. Like I have this weird mixture of excitement and nervousness, right?
Yeah,
Um,
Yeah.
the analogy that I've used a lot is, hey, the wave is coming, or the wave is here, and so I'd rather be surfing on the wave than like underneath it.
getting smashed by the
And
wave.
that's the other reason that I've dove in head first into this, is like, okay, like I'm not going to be one of those guys that's going to put my head in the sand and get behind. So yeah, so that's kind of what I feel is, whether it's that search engine or the industry in general, is a mixture of excitement and nervousness. So
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're here. I mean, it's here. There's no escaping it.
Yeah.
You got
Yeah.
to ride the wave for sure.
Yeah,
So
figure it out or get behind.
Yeah.
yeah, or as we just talked about in our podcast with Robert, you
Yeah.
have to adapt or be terminated.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so in addition to staying up to date with AI developments and using them to the best of your ability to improve your current processes, do you have any other advice for people who are in SEO and want to kind of safeguard themselves for this, whatever the future might be?
Um, I mean, I can speak for myself personally, and this goes outside of the realm of purely like SEO or even digital marketing. I guess my general advice would be to always be open to diversification, right? I've been doing SEO since around 2009, right? And
Mhm.
every 3 to 5 years, someone, of prominence either quits the industry or writes a 5,000 word blog post about how SEO is dead. And I've lived my life every day like SEO could be dead tomorrow, right? Because
Mhm.
one day we could wake up and Google will say, okay, it's all ads, right? So for myself personally, like, I am a big fan of diversification. So I don't talk a lot about this, but my wife and I, we have real estate on the side, and I invest in stocks and crypto. And even in our agency, we're starting to explore stuff that we never did before, like doing more branding, doubling down on website design, more pay-per-click marketing, and even looking for other more holistic marketing verticals that we can get into, so that if things should shift, we won't be caught with our pants down. So
Right.
that's kind of where I'm at. Whether that works for everybody, I mean, I guess you got to discern your own situation, but that would be my recommendation.
Awesome. That's pretty much what we're telling people to do. Focus on branding, focus on
Yep.
other parts of digital marketing,
Yeah.
social media, video, short form video, email lists, web design, all this stuff is PPC. Um, Once you know everything, if SEO takes a little bit of a hit, it won't be as big of a deal,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, what you said is also important about diversifying your revenue streams and not just SEO, right?
Right.
Always smart to
Yeah.
do as well. Um, so I guess the last SEO related question we'll ask is, unless Nick has anything, um, what do you think SEOs in 2023 should be focusing more heavily on? Just what aspect of their job do you think is the most important thing to focus on right now?
Yeah, so a lot of this we've already like touched on, so we won't belabor the AI, but I think, just to come back to that, definitely get to know this new emerging technology. I think, you're going to better yourself for that.
Hmm.
You guys will probably like this answer, but again, me thinking a lot of that, like how does this impact SEO? I'm thinking, okay, well, in my opinion, and we'll see if this reigns true. I think link acquisition is going to be one of those things that's going to grow in relevance, or like in like value. Only because if the barrier to entry for content is now lower, Google only has so many other levers to dial up to fit into their algorithmic stew.
Hmm.
So, that's things like engagement and, all the other stuff that they put documentation around. But at the end of the day, it's content and links and technical SEO, right? Those are the
Hmm.
three main buckets, right? So yeah, I think doubling down on well thought out, well structured link acquisition, maybe re-emphasis on technical SEO. That's an area where, you know, we win out a lot of our competition, because a lot of our competitors, they don't have a back end development team. They don't understand how to do the level of technical SEO. And then just getting familiar with AI. I think It's a lot of the same things that have always worked, just in different volumes and potential reoriented emphasis. I think
For sure.
that's kind of what we're looking out for.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, if if the playing field gets equalized as far as content goes, and everyone can do great content very quickly and easily and cheaply, then the decider has to be something else, right? Which is most likely going to be
Exactly.
backlinks, which is of course good for us over at SirLinksalot.
Yeah, we're
But yeah,
okay with that.
we also pretty think it's going to be a lot of emphasis on user signals as well. Now, I always
Yep.
say that I think
Yeah.
Google, if Google could make Google more like YouTube, they would. It's like
Sure.
on YouTube they can see exactly what's happening since it's all on their platform, and
Yep.
the way that YouTube works is quite different. And that Google wishes they could do that, but they don't have access to the same level of information, right?
Right.
Um, but yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up, man. It was very good talking to you again. It's been a while, been a couple
Likewise. Yeah.
months.
Good
We
seeing you guys'
missed you.
face again.
We missed you greatly. Are you going to be in Chiang Mai for the conference later this year?
Unfortunately, I'm not going to be in Chiang Mai. Like have total FOMO over that.
Did you
Yeah, it was
miss
just too many
the?
international trips.
Okay.
But I will be in Estonia in August. So
Mhm.
for anyone that's going to be in Europe around that time, come check out that conference. It's Estonia's first SEO conference, so I'm honored to be on the speaking circuit there. And yeah, I'll be with
Yeah,
you in spirit, at least. So
that's exciting. That's Kyle Roof is a part of putting that on, right?
yeah, it's not only Estonia's first conference, it's Kyle's first conference. So I
Yeah.
don't know what's cooler, but
Very
Yeah, I think it's
cool.
gonna be really exciting.
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. When is that again? Sorry.
I should know the dates. I know the dates because it's August 16th, and it's like a 3-day event.
Okay, well, slim chances, but maybe we make it over there too, just to get to see you again, get to see you and Kyle.
Yeah, if you guys can make it, it'd
Yeah.
be fun times for sure. So
Mm-hmm.
For sure, for sure. So besides the conference coming up, where else can people find you online if they want to hear more from the mythical Adam Chronister?
yeah, so you can always hit us up on our website, enleaf.com. That's enleaf.com. Or you can just find me via email, Twitter, Facebook, all the good outlets. So
Awesome. Well, yeah, been great talking to you, and yeah, hope to have you on again soon. Maybe in a year or so, we can have an update on what your AI is looking like for your AI uses for
Yeah,
your agency.
no doubt,
sounds
big
good. Thanks,
things.
guys.
All right, adios, man.
See ya.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Be sure to check the links below for more info on this topic, as well as other cool stuff like SEO case studies, our Facebook community, and our link building services. And like always, please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thanks, and happy ranking.